an example of on the projectile motion. The projectile is fired with an initial speed of 25 meters per second, oriented 37 degrees above the horizontal. For letter A, find the position and the velocity of the ball when time is equal to 2 seconds. Take note that here's the nadre mong origin. So you're to find the position and the velocity of the ball when time is equal to 2 seconds. So here's the initial, and then the final, I'm not pretty sure kung nilapas og maximum height or wala. Okay, shall we say nga nilapas siya og maximum height. Okay, so pasabot, we're looking for its x and y positions. Final. Its initial, since both origin, okay, it's on the origin, as origin, so x sub o and y sub o is equal to 0. So take note nga diri, iyahang magnitude sa initial velocity VO is equal to 25 meters per second. And ang iyang angle kay, it's given by 37 degrees. So take note that when solving mga problems sa projectile motion, you need to look for its x and y components. Okay, initial nga VOX and VOY. So this time, nasa first quadrant imong vector, so pasabot kay imong ng e-component method. So pasabot mo ni imong VOX, it's on the adjacent side of angle 37, so you have to use cosine. And then imong VOY na diri. Pwede ka magamit diri or pwede pod sa pikas. Okay, so take note that it's VOX kay nasa adjacent side, so cosine, so you'll have 25 meters per second cosine 37. So that would be 20 meters per second. And ang VOY is on the opposite side of angle 37. Pwede diri na siya. Sorry, nang lapas akong kuan. Or pwede kining isa. So 25 meters per second sine 37, that would be 15 meters per second. So umana. So you're done with finding the VOX and the VOY. So take note that for letter A, aside sa position, final positions X and Y, it's also looking for VX, VY. Okay, so we've assumed nga nasa diri mga bata, no? Okay, so it's looking for kaninga position. Kana nga X, and then kaninga height Y. Okay, so pinakauna is that we look for position X. Okay, so we're going to list the given nga mga variables. So mo nang the following given variables. It is understood nga x sub o, y sub o are 0 kay nara origin, final na diri. So ang isa ka given kay ang time, 2 seconds. So for x, diri ka mangita sa x component. Okay, so basically you'll have you'll use this equation sa x component. So equation 1 sa x component, so you'll have x minus x sub o is equal to VOX times time t. Okay, so you'll have x sub o is simply equal to 0. So nakay x is equal to VOX times time. So that would be 20 meters per second times 2 seconds. Your range at that time is simply equal to 40 meters. Okay, so that would only mean that this is 40 mga bata. Okay, this is 40 meters. Next, it's for its position or height y. Okay, so look for equation 1 if you could use position y, find position y, so walay y, no? So it could either be nasa 2, 3, 4. But if you'll notice, final velocity at this point is not given. So meaning to say, I'm going to use equation 2. Equation nga walay final velocity. So you'll have y sub o, v sub oyt minus 1 half gt squared. Y sub o is equal to 0, so this will be cancelled out. Moray ma-cancel out, so ang tendency you'll have here, y is equal to 15 meters per second times 2 seconds minus 4.9, 9.8 divided by 2, that would be 4.9 meters per second squared times 2 seconds raised to the power 2. So that would be 10.4. Okay, so that will be 10.4 meters. So here, ang coordinates ani niya is simply you'll have height 10.4 meters. So final positions will be 40 by 10.4. Okay, next, it's looking for its final velocity at time equal to 2 seconds. So here, it's looking for Vx and Vy. Okay, so here for Vx, kay x component man na siya, so you need to use or use this x component equation. So it states that your final velocity ng component sa x is equal to its initial. So meaning to say it's equal to 20 meters per second. So Vox is equal to Vx, which is also equal to 20 meters per second. Okay, next is for your Vy. Okay, so you need to look for your, i-check nimo sa y component, diri ka sa y component ng equations. So if you'll notice, equation 1, pwede. Equation 2, wala final velocity. So pasabot, equation 1, 3, and 4 can be used in solving your Vy kay given maning x of y positions. So you can use equations 1, 3, and 4. But for me, I'm going to use equation 1. So using equation 1, so y component, so you'll have Vy is equal to Voy minus Gt. So you'll have here 15 meters per second minus 9.8 meters per second squared times 2 seconds. So that would be negative 4.6 meters per second. Okay, that would be your Vy. If you're going to look for its magnitude and direction, you can use Pythagorean theorem to solve for its magnitude. And you can also use tangent function or trigonometric functions in order to solve for your directions. Okay, kamo na bahala nag-solve Vy over Vx. So that would only mean that here's the velocity vector v, magnitude kamo na solve, but then for its Vx, this is 20, and then here, this is negative 4.6 here Vy. And you're looking for this angle here, theta. Okay, next, for letter B, find the time when the ball reaches the highest point of its flight and the height of this point. So again, I repeat, here, same like gyapon given, here's the origin. So this time, the transfer na no, origin, paingon diriya. the maximum height. Take note that at maximum height, na-prime 0, and that would be your Vy is equal to 0 at maximum height. So here, duha ka variables ang gipangita. Let's list first the given. Given kay, you already know that x sub o and y sub o are 0 since ang initial point is at the origin. Vox is 20 meters per second. Voy is equal to 15 meters per second. And your final velocity is simply equal to 0 by maximum height. Okay, so here it's looking, let's first solve for the time t. So for time t at maximum height, ngay time diri, pero walay range at this point. So di naman siya maggamit. So let's look for the x component. Time, 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 time. So here, equation 1 to look for time. Yes, pwede. And the rest nga equations kay dili. Walay positions gihatag. So the only equation nga magamit is equation 1. So you'll have Vy is equal to V sub Oy minus GT. Ma-cancel out ning Vy, 0. So ang tendency, transpose to the other side of the equation. So your time t is simply given by V sub Oy over G. V sub Oy is 15. So 15 meters per second divided by 9.8 meters per second squared. So the answer would be 1.53 seconds. Okay, next. Okay, given mo ng time, so you could also solve for its height, this point. Final height, initial kay 0. So here, y max ang yang pangita. Height at maximum height. So ang tendency is that y man, so you have to look for this y component equations. There are many equations you can use. Equations 2, 3, 4, since given mo ng time. Praying kaso if dugay mo nakarealize sa pag-solve sa time, so you can use equation form. Equation 4, equation walay time. So you'll have Vy squared is equal to Voy squared minus 2g y minus y sub 0. Okay, so here take note that y sub 0 is equal to 0. And then final velocity is simply equal to 0. Okay, so you're left with a term. Add 2gy both sides or transpose it to the other side of the equation. So imuhang 2gy is equal to Voy squared. Divide 2g both sides, so your y is equal to Voy squared over 2g. So at tendency, you'll have 15 meters per second squared divided by 2 times 9.8 meters per second squared. So that would be 11.5 meters. Muna yung y max. Okay, so it does make sense. Diri 10.4 kini nga height, so diri kay 11.5 meters. Okay, next for letter C, find the total time of flight of the ball. So here, take note nga pag symmetric gani ang parabola, mao gyapon ang given no? Total time of flight meaning to say kani paingon diri. So, mao gyapon ang given again, take note that your Vox is 20 and your Voy is 15. Okay, so take note nga ang time it takes for this one here is 1.53 seconds. So kung ingani, kung symmetric ka yung parabola, same og height ang launching og landing point, pwede ra nga i-times 2 nimo. Ang total time of flight diri is pwede nga i-multiply nimo diretso og 2. So, ang tendency, pwede reach 3.06 seconds. Okay, pero if you're not satisfied nga kon, nga kinahanglan yun na solution, well then using these kinematic equations, pwede gyapon. Okay, so take note nga, x sub o, y sub o, x sub o, initial nga mga positions kay 0. Origin man ni dire. And then, ang range or ang x, wala ko kabalo, wa man gipangita. Pero it's looking for its lantawa ang height at this point. So that would be 0 at the same time. So it's looking for its total time of flight. So here, night duha ka makita ni mang time sa duha ka components pwede sa x, pwede sa y. Pero wa may range so di ni magamit nga equation. So diri ka sa y component. Equation 1, equation 2, equation 1 pwede. Before it strikes the ground, take note nga na siya maximum, na siya velocity nga makalculate. So dili zero ang velocity the moment it strikes the ground. Before it strikes the ground. So ang tendency, we're going to use equation 2 for this case. So you'll have, using equation 2, lang ang pwede magamit. So you'll have y sub o, v sub oyt minus 1/2 gt squared. So basically here, y sub o is simply equal to 0. So ang left side sa equation kay ma 0, so you're left with a term nga 1/2 gt squared. Transpose this to the other side of the equation, so you'll have v sub oy times t. So divide t both sides of the equation na isa diri mahibilin, so you'll have t, and then multiply 2 over g both sides of the equation, 2 over g. So you'll have 2 voy over g. So you're left, substitute, so you'll have 15 meters per second divided by 9.8 meters per second squared. So you'll have 3.06 seconds. Ayan na ma-happen nga times 2 whenever symmetric ang parabola. Same ang gilanchingan sa ball and then gilandingan po sa bola. And lastly, find the horizontal range. Okay, so it's asking for this one here. Connected ra. Okay, mo na nga range, horizontal range ang gipangita niya. So here, again, I repeat, parihara siya o given dayon sa taas, sa letter C. The only thing na na-add kay ang time, 3.06. So from letter C, ang time at this point is equal to 3.06 seconds. So to look for its range, so sa x component ka maglantaw, x sub o plus vox times time t. So x sub o is equal to 0. So your range x is simply equal to 20 meters per second times its time nga 3.06 seconds. So nasa mga 61.2 meters.